Come here. Luna. Luna. Hey, hold still. Hold still. Ready? Up we go. Luna. Say hi to the camera. Okay, down we go. Hello, my name is Tucker, and today I'm going to be talking about what it's like inside my brain, specifically, as in mental illness, so specifically anxiety and OCD and how those two intertwine and how I deal with them specifically. Before I start, I just want to say that everyone experiences mental illness differently. My experience is likely not your experience, and when I talk about OCD, I'm doing my best to avoid generalizations and things like that. Also, a trigger warning, I'm going to go into a lot of, not as dark as my mental hospital experiences video, but a lot of potentially triggering stuff like thought spirals, intrusives, which I'll explain those terms in a minute. So if that has any potential to trigger you, please don't watch this video. And if you decide to stay, I hope you enjoy the video. I hope that you can relate to something or you learn something. Yeah, let's get into the video. Okay, the first thing I want to do is talk about the official diagnoses I have, and with me I have my trusty DSM. This will help me explain my diagnoses, even though I don't think I need a book to explain them, but I have it just in case. So the first one I have is, let's see if I can find it. I have so many sticky notes in this. I have generalized anxiety disorder, also known as overanxious disorder of childhood, or includes that. I'm reading from the DSM. This is like one of my favorite books. I love this book so much. Basically, generalized anxiety disorder is an anxiety disorder that's obviously generalized, so it's not a specific phobia. Like social anxiety disorder would be specific anxiety about socializing or social anxiety. But with me, my anxiety doesn't have a specific target. Like, I'm not specifically afraid of spiders or socializing or presentations. And actually, all of those things I am afraid of. But my anxiety generalizes. It just spreads into almost every aspect of my life, which is why I have generalized anxiety disorder rather than a specific anxiety disorder like social phobia and things like that. The next diagnosis I have is depression disorder, otherwise unspecified. Basically what this means is it was a depressive disorder, so I had depression to the point of disorder, to the point of suicide or suicidal attempts, and it was unspecified. So it wasn't depression because of a cause, it wasn't depression, major depression disorder, not bipolar depressive episode, it was just unspecified. I don't really know what that means, but that's the diagnosis. And then finally, the diagnosis that I have, that I struggle with the most is Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder, OCD. And that's what I'm going to talk about mostly in this video. There's so much to talk about. I could talk for hours about OCD, about its effects on me, and how it works, but the thing I want to start with is the stigma and myths. A lot of people think of OCD and think hand washing and everything has to be lined up perfectly. Now, you'll notice behind me, my books are lined up perfectly. That is not OCD. That is a preference. I will not go crazy. I will not lose my mind if they are not lined up perfectly. It bugs me, but it's not OCD. And that's another thing that really, really annoys me, when people like things clean, or they see a little smudge or stain or something like that, and they have like, I'm gonna wipe that up, haha, I'm so OCD. Or that's my OCD. Like, if you have OCD and it causes you to have obsessions and compulsions related to cleaning, that is fine. It annoys me when people without OCD that don't really understand what it's like to actually suffer from OCD say, haha, I'm OCD, to make a joke out of it. Like, you wouldn't say, haha, I'm so cancer, I'm so diabetes. Like, I find it very annoying and frustrating that people kind of almost make a joke out of obsessive-compulsive disorder. Yeah. And now I want to dispel some myths. And again, I'm trying to avoid generalizations, but I'm also trying to avoid cliches and stereotypes. One thing a lot of people think of when they think of OCD is, as I said, hand-washing and perfectionism. And though those are symptoms and very common ones of OCD, they are not the only symptoms. I love that OCD is, you can kind of break it down with its title, Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder. So starting with the obsessive, this is the part of OCD I struggle with, obsessive. I get stuck in thought spirals, anxiety. Let me explain thought spirals. Thought spirals are basically when I get one thought stuck in my head, one anxious thought, and I can't stop thinking about it. And when I say I can't stop thinking about it, I literally mean I cannot stop thinking about it. My brain will not let me not think about it. That's not an exaggeration, that's not a hyperbole. It is miserable to be stuck in the thought spiral. And they come in different intensities. Like, they'll come in little mini thought spirals, like, I just bumped into that person, they probably hate me, and maybe for an hour or two I'll just be thinking, oh, they probably hate me, but I bumped into them, and then it just goes in a circle. And then there are the bigger thought spirals. Like, over Christmas break, I had a almost trauma-related thought spiral, because last year I was in the hospital for depression and suicidal ideations, and that was very scary and traumatizing. So this year, I was like, what if it happens again? And my OCD latched onto that thought and ran with it. And so it was like, well, what if I get depressed again? What if I try to kill myself again? What if I end up in the hospital again? What if I end up again and again and just keep going? And then what if my life never becomes anything? What if I just die alone and sad? And it goes from there. It spirals. It's like a snowball. And even though I've never actually seen snowballs like get bigger and bigger as they go down the hill, I'm sure it's possible, but I've never seen it. Anywho, I need to slow down. I can literally hear myself talking fast. This is what happens when I get A, excited, nervous, or passionate. Who knows? It could be all of those. Anywho, yeah, that's how thought spirals work. They snowball, they spiral and coil tighter and tighter and tighter until I am in tears or I am having a panic attack. But usually after that climax of anxiety, they tend to kind of dissipate, which is good. But yeah, that is the obsessive part of OCD. The repetitive thoughts, the thought spirals, and I didn't mention this, intrusives. Intrusives are intrusive thoughts, so disturbing or usually unwanted thoughts that you can't stop thinking about. For instance, when I see a knife, my brain instantly thinks, pick up that knife and stab yourself in the stomach with it. Obviously, I do not want to stab myself in the stomach with a knife. And I would never do that. But my brain goes there. And it goes there because I don't want to think about that. Like if I said right now, don't think about the color red. You just thought about the color red. Because your brain just goes there. You can't not think about something. Because that's just kind of how your brain works. But with intrusives, they're more vivid thoughts. And they're harder to get them to go away. And they're very scary. Like around cliffs, my brain thinks jump or push the person next to you. And this is why I don't talk about this much when people hear that, oh, I have thoughts about pushing you off a cliff, or I have thoughts about stabbing you. Like, I have to explain to them, I don't want to stab you. I don't plan on stabbing you. And I'm not really actually thinking about stabbing you. It's the fact that my brain sees this contaminated thought, and then I want to stop thinking about it, but then my brain can't stop thinking about it. Excuse me. And that's just how OCD, obsessive thoughts work for me. Again, that's my experience. Some people out there might have a different experience. That's just how it works for me. And then those obsessive thoughts lead to compulsions. Compulsions are rituals, habits, things like that, to alleviate the anxiety from those scary thoughts. So, for instance, if I am having a thought spiral about, let's just say I'm having a thought spiral about germs, even though is it germophobia? I think it's germophobia. I don't know. The fear of germs is not something I deal with at all. I'm glad, because I'm sure it would be a struggle, but I'm not afraid of germs, which is really good. But let's just say I was. It would start with someone sneezes near me. That starts a thought spiral. Oh my gosh, this person sneezed near me. I'm gonna get sick. This thought spiral would keep going, and it would make me more and more anxious. So to alleviate this obsessive thought spiral, I use a compulsion. A compulsion would be, in this example, a compulsion to help alleviate the thought spiral of I'm going to get sick would be washing my hands. That is a compulsion, washing your hands. Because I think that if I wash my hands, the thought spiral will go down. And usually what happens in those cases is one hand wash is not enough. You have to wash them again, and again, and again, and again, and it just kind of spirals and spirals. And that's kind of how OCD works. You start with an obsessive thought, which leads to a compulsion. The compulsion kind of alleviates the obsessive thought, but then it kind of comes back up, or a new one sprouts up. And that's the thing I hate about my OCD. It intertwines with my generalized anxiety disorder. Once I finally get a specific spiral, like my spiral about just depression over the winter break, once I got that down without compulsions, and that's the thing about compulsions, they're usually negative. Some can be positive, I suppose. Like, cleaning isn't a bad thing. It's when it becomes disorderly, which is something I didn't talk about yet. The definition of a disorder by a dictionary I'm saying, because I don't remember which one it was, is when something gets in the way of your social, mental, and physical well-being. So it's fine if you're cleaning and that calms you down. That's fine. But if it's getting in the way of you remembering to eat, or getting in the way of you remembering to sleep, or getting in the way of you hanging out with your friends, that's when it becomes a disorder. And with me, my obsessive-compulsive habits became a disorder when the obsessive thoughts about so many things, just general anxiety and obsessions, became compulsive, and that compulsion was trying to kill myself. And those obsessive thoughts don't usually lead to those extreme compulsions. My situation was just especially extreme. It was a whole thing of events that one thing led to another, and it was just, yeah. But anyways, what was I talking about earlier? Those compulsions. But yeah. Obsessions lead to compulsions, and they just spiral around each other. For instance, now I remember that was what I was saying. The thing about my mental illnesses is my generalized anxiety intertwines with my OCD. Once I get a thought spiral to calm down and I get control of it and I kind of get it to a baseline of just generally anxious, that my anxiety, my OCD can't feed on that spiral anymore, so it turns to something else. And I think of my anxiety and my OCD like a beast. It needs to be constantly feeding. So if it can't feed on a depression thought spiral, it stops trying and it moves on. And that's the annoying thing about my thought spirals. It's like playing whack-a-mole. One comes up, I get it to go down, and then another pops up, and I get that one to go down, and then another pops up. And though they are getting easier to calm down, I don't think I'll ever not deal with anxiety thought spirals, which is fine because after years and years and years of therapy and trying to figure out how to make it go away, mental illness that is, I realized that you can't make it go away. You can only learn how to live in spite of it, which sucks, but that's how it is. The nice thing about me recognizing that those thought spirals do pop up is once I recognize something as a thought spiral, it almost loses its potency. I think that's the word, potency. Because I'm like, no, you're just a collection of thoughts and I don't need to deal with you. And also, once a thought spiral comes into my mind, it's almost like a vaccine. And I'm not talking about vaccines. I'm not trying to start a scandal or controversy. I'm talking about mental illness. Basically, it's like an inoculation. Once a thought spiral comes into my mind and I get it down, it becomes weaker and weaker every time. And my hope is that once my brain exhausts all the potential thought spirals, each one of them will get weaker and weaker, and I will get stronger and stronger at beating them. And I think that's already starting to happen. I've gotten a lot better at recognizing them, a lot better at getting them to calm down, and a lot better at positively coping. But yeah, that's just how OCD works for me. As far as what triggers it, it can be anything, because as I said, generalized anxiety, it's generalized. It's basically a blanket of anxiety rather than a specific pinpoint. Yeah. And the thing is, it's hard to recognize OCD because, it took 14 years for me and my parents to finally realize I had OCD. It actually took me going to a psych hospital inpatient twice before the doctors were like, hey, maybe this is what's wrong with you. Because OCD and anxiety, both, they know how to disguise themselves. When I was little, I used to deal with a lot of stomach issues, and we thought there was something wrong with my stomach, but it was just my anxiety. My anxiety mimics everything that causes anxiety. For instance, I have a humongous fear of seizures because I have a seizure disorder. And so, because of that, my anxiety mimics seizures. It makes me dizzy, or it makes me feel like I can't breathe. And that's how it kind of almost provides food for itself. And that kind of leads back to the spiral, which again leads back to how important it is to recognize those feelings as anxiety and as thought spirals, because then I realize that it's not a seizure, it's anxiety. And knowledge is definitely power. But yeah, I think the reason it took so long for us to recognize that I had OCD is because so many people view OCD in the stereotypes of hand washing, checking things, like making sure your door is shut by opening and closing it 3 times, stuff like that. And those are symptoms, and people do deal with that, but those aren't the symptoms I deal with, which is why we didn't realize I had OCD. But it was actually the fact that the doctor said, we think Tucker has the obsessive part. It's the constant thinking about things, the constant checking, mentally checking. And also, another thing that a lot of people don't realize is there's also religious OCD, or mental contamination. This is something I struggle with as well, where I will get a dirty thought, anything from sex to lying to any of that stuff, and I think, I'm going to hell, I'm gonna die, God hates me, and that is religious contamination. And religion also gets mixed up in OCD because of the way it works, the constant checking for sins, stuff like that. And then, what else? Is there anything else I want to talk about? This video hasn't really gone how I expected it to go. It's kind of just me talking to the camera because that's therapeutic for me. And I don't have therapy for another 2 weeks. So, humor me. Let's see, is there anything else I want to talk about? Let me page through the DSM, see if there's anything interesting. Oh, yes. Another thing that I have with OCD is diagnoses. That is something I obsess about or I've gotten a lot better, something I used to obsess about, I would diagnose myself. Kind of like it's a whole, like it's the running joke on the internet, oh, I have a headache and Google says I'm dying. That's what I would do. I would say, okay, let me page through the DSM, which in case I don't think I explained it, the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders, or basically, the Mental Illness Dictionary. And I would page through the DSM and bookmark every single disorder I thought I have, I thought I had. And I came to the doctor with 2 full sheets, double-sided, a list of all the diagnoses I was convinced I had. So I think that is because it took so long for me to realize that it was anxiety causing all of my stomach issues and all of my pain, that now I almost developed a subconscious fear of, well, what if I'm still missing something? And to avoid missing something, I have to diagnose everything. And that's the whole obsessive thought compulsion. The obsessive thought is, what if I'm missing something? And the compulsion is, diagnose myself with everything in the book. And I think that it's always going to be a struggle, which is fine, but I definitely think recognizing these things helps. Also, something I said to my parents, I think it was last night when I was talking about this, is talking, excuse me, talking helps. Everyone says it, and you might think, ugh, everyone says that, but it really does. Talking helps, verbal processing helps, because it lets your thoughts become less of a floaty, abstract thing, and almost more of a concrete thing. Now, excuse me, I understand that not everyone watching this has the means to get a therapist, or has friends, and I get that. I used to not really have anyone to talk to. I would go through brief phases of not having a therapist, and generally I used to not be great at making friends. I'm still not that great at making friends, but I do have more people I can talk to now. And that's something I've encouraged people to do, is sometimes, and this sounds like such a cliche, but sometimes you have to be your own friend. And, like, this is going to sound crazy, but I legitimately talk to myself all the time. And not even, like, in my head. I will literally whisper. I'll be like, and yeah, do that. Like, I will be, like, in the bathroom, or in my bedroom, or in the hallway. I will legitimately whisper to myself. I talk to myself because it is very helpful. Putting those thoughts out loud, even though they're just coming back into myself, can be very helpful. Also, another thing to keep in mind on the note of talking to yourself is the person you hate the most. This is kind of leading to insecurity, which I could do a whole video on. The person you hate the most is you. Unless you're a super secure person, which if you are, lucky you, I wish I was. And I'm a lot better now. But keep in mind that you're a lot harder on yourself than you should be, and you wouldn't be that hard on anyone else unless you hate them. But yeah, I'm getting off topic. Back to OCD. Is there anything else I wanted to talk about? Paging through the DSM again. Yee. I love this book, though, seriously. It's so pretty. Okay, let's end this video before it gets any more chaotic. What was I gonna do at the end? Oh yeah, I was gonna share some of my favorite books that deal with mental illness, not just OCD. But I need to collect them, so give me a second. Cut. Okay, I'm back and I have a stack of books about mental illness. Yay. Of course, I want to say that all of these do deal with mental illness, mostly in a positive light, but most of them are also kind of heavy, so if that's going to trigger you, don't read any of these, and I'll talk about the specific triggers for each book. The first book I have is The Bride Test by Helen Hoang. I think that's how her last name is pronounced, but I'm not completely sure. This one is the Own Voices representation for autism. It is a romance about a girl with autism who moves from from Vietnam. Yeah, I was about to say a country somewhere. From Vietnam to basically make a boy fall in love with her, I think. No. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm really bad at synopsises. Basically, this guy's mom asks this girl from Vietnam to come make her son fall in love with her because she thinks he needs a bride. Yeah, that made sense. Just Google the bride test and you'll find a much better synopsis than mine because I suck at synopses, which is the plural of synopsis, right? Synopses? I don't know. This book is good. Autism. There isn't really actually any trigger. As far as I know, there isn't much triggering stuff in here, I believe. Yeah, I think there might be obviously some trigger warnings for slight, what's the word? My brain is not working today. I didn't get sleep last night. Oh well, I'm not dying inside because I can barely stay awake. Anywho, this one is pretty lighthearted. It's a rom-com. The next one I have is Camp by Elsie Rosen. This doesn't come out until May of 2020 from Little Brown Books for Young Readers, but I highly recommend it. It's an LGBT novel about a boy who basically changes himself, both physically and, emotionally to make another boy fall in love with him. They cover a lot of really good topics, such as, body dysmorphia, or basically hatred of your own body, gender dysphoria, stuff like that. And this is a rom-com as well. It's a little bit heavier, just because of the content they deal with, but I do really recommend it. It's a very sweet and poignant novel. The next one I have is The Art of Losing by Lizzy Mason. I think this one is signed, right? Yeah. I have a really bad memory. Is it signed? Yeah, it is. This book is really good. This is basically about a girl whose sister is in a coma because she went home with a drunk driver. And I'll just read the synopsis because I'm horrible at synopses. On one terrible night, 17-year-old Harley Langston's life changes forever. At a party, she discovers her younger sister, Audrey, hooking up with her boyfriend, Mike, and she abandons them both in a rage. When Mike drunkenly attempts to drive Audrey home, he crashes and Audrey ends up in a coma. Now Harley is left with guilt, grief, and pain, and the undeniable truth that her ex-boyfriend, who's relatively unscathed, has a drinking problem. So it's a surprise that she finds herself reconnecting with Raph, a neighbor and a childhood friend who's recently out of rehab and still wrestling with his own demons. At first, Harley doesn't want to get too close to him, but as Audrey awakens and slowly recovers, Raph starts to show Harley a path forward that she never would have believed possible. One guided by honesty, forgiveness, and redemption. This is a really good book. It made me cry multiple times. It is the Own Voices representation for addiction recovery. Lizzy Mason dealt with addiction. She actually talked about this at Gaithersburg Book Festival, and it was really a really good speech. It actually made me cry a little. It was moving, and this book is also really moving. It deals with really heavy topics, but in an amazing way, in a very redemptive way. I highly recommend it, but trigger warning for addiction, for drunk driving, for cheating, and my brain just blanked. What was I saying? I don't know. This book is heavy, really good though. Next book I have is an anthology. I've talked about this before. It is Don't Call Me Crazy by Kelly, Jensen, and others. I'm not going to read that long list. If you want to read that long list, pause the video now and read it, because I ain't reading it on camera. This is an anthology from all of these authors where they share their stories about mental illness. Once again, this has a variety of trigger warnings for basically most of the mental illnesses in the book. Mostly anxiety, OCD, depression, bipolar disorder, and I think that might be all the main ones. It's heavy, but it's really good. It's also really cool to hear authors that you probably love that they struggle with the same thing you do. That's really enlightening and encouraging. And then finally, the book I have isn't really a book, it's the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Illnesses. This is, I don't know how to trigger warning this, because there's no dark content, there's no, like, dialogue. This is literally just a science book about mental illness. But if you're like me and you might diagnose yourself with everything, then don't read this, because it's not going to help. Anywho, that's the video. Basically just me talking about myself and my brain, which is, like, a little weird. My brain, I mean, not me, but I am weird. Anywho, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was entertaining. I don't know. It was kind of all over the place. Sometimes I just like to sit down and talk to the camera, because sometimes that helps someone. If there's just one person who found this helpful, then it was totally worth it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Hello, my name is... This is a test for audio and video quality. I'm home alone, so I don't have to care who hears me. Oh, ow! I forgot I have a crick in my neck. Ow. No, you're getting angry at the way that you... I have a cold. You wouldn't hit the sick and weak. At the way that you are. I will throw this at you. I will.
Oh, yeah, do it.
I'm not joking. I will.
Do it.
You know I will.
Do it.
You know I will.
Do it. Do it. You're not going to.
I'm going to.
Do it then.
You 10 seconds. 10.
What?
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh my word, Tucker.
Oh no.
What did you do?
I'll be taking over this channel. No, give me bloopers.